Hello to the folks who are just hopping on. Let's give it one more minute here. We'll let a few more people join us, and then we will get this party started. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining today's webinar. This is Intro to Revit, Best Practices for Mechanical Contractors. Whether you're looking to switch to Revit, get a refresher course, or see if you can pick up some tips to improve your baseline workflows, this is the webinar for you. Presenting today is Alex Hanna from BIMTM. BIMTM and EVOLVE partner up to educate and train folks in using Revit. And if you have any questions about that, please submit them using the Q&A function in your Zoom toolbar. And as we're going through the process today, go ahead and submit any questions that might have while we're going through the different tools. And we'll definitely have some time at the end to take your questions as well. As a reminder, this webinar is being recorded and we'll forward the recording to all registrants. You can also find all of our EVOLVE webinar recordings on the EVOLVE MEP YouTube channel. Fantastic. And with that, I'll let Alex take it away.
Hi, everybody. My name is Alex Hanna. I'm with BIMTM, like Marina said. Welcome to today's webinar. To kind of touch on the EVOLVE and BIMTM connection. Basically, what we're doing is we're here to provide the best kind of training and education provided to you guys for Revit to get you a great foundation to start with, and then EVOLVE coming in and enhancing that workflow. That's something we're going to talk about a lot. Is Revit is a tool, and there's a lot of things in Revit that can be done manually, and some things that can't be done. That EVOLVE enhances those workflows. Highly recommend using EVOLVE, especially if you're in this kind of fabrication spooling environment. And pretty much any kind of mechanical modeling, they have a lot of extensive tools that allow you to move around in Revit. If you're new to Revit, also good, we're going to talk about that as well. So mechanical in Revit, mechanical plumbing, we'll say sheet metal and pipe. Revit provides a 3D visualization of what you're drawing. So with typical softwares, if you're not used to 3D, 2D, you're used to drawing line work and having to notate what direction the slope is and things like that. With 3D visualization, you still do the same stuff when you're modeling, and I'll show you that as well. But you get to see it in 3D and isometric, rotate around, look up, look down, and kind of get a better idea of how that material fits in that space. So you get advanced coordination, clash detection, and you can do fabricatable models from it as well, because now you can rotate that piece in any way that you want and be able to diagnose which piece is A, B, C, D. I will touch on the 3D visualization once we do more of the demo later, but understand the 3D model and clash detection is highly important because you can now move around the space and see why it's clashing and where it is. So some quick barriers to entry with Revit. Obviously, you need to have leadership buy-in. Leadership buy-in has been, from what I've seen, is probably the biggest step just to getting into BIM. There's a lot of pushback a little bit, like BIM's expensive and things like that. But what I like to tell people, it's hard to put a price on BIM because BIM saves you from making the mistakes that cost you money, but you don't know you're making those mistakes when you're using BIM because don't do them. So it's hard to put a cost on that. Like, how do I tell someone that if they didn't have BIM, they would have had to make a mistake and put in those RFIs and things like that. The next thing is actually getting the Revit license. So once you have leadership buy-in, you get your Revit license, you sign up with Autodesk, and you use that login, and that login works for multiple softwares with Autodesk. The next thing after Revit is, why you're here also, is knowledge of the software. So Revit is a tool. Along with it are many other tools that come with it. But unless you know how to use those tools properly or the proper workflow that works best for you, it's just another, hammer in the toolbox. Knowledge of the software is going to put your team and understanding of 3D modeling to the next level, and then also enhancing it later with uh, third parties or with Evolve brings that even to a higher tier. Another thing is the willingness to learn. So change is hard. No one no one likes change. I think we all can agree with that. But the willingness to learn and kind of get into what that change looks like for you is going to be a better experience rather than fighting it the whole way. So leadership buy-in, license, knowledge of software, and willingness to learn, these are probably the biggest four things to overcome when you're thinking about getting into BIM, especially with Revit. But going into Revit now, we're going to talk some first steps to get started. Like we talked about training um, and understanding the software. Learning the basics um, to improve your knowledge and skill. Learning the basics is the biggest thing. Again, is where are all the buttons? I may not know what every button does, but I know where the button is. Um, how do I model plumbing? I may not know all the nuances to modeling plumbing in 3D, but I know how to get to that point. Those are kind of like the basics. Understanding those basics and using those skills, like actually finding out where those buttons are and how those button works, that's the knowledge and skill level to increase. Then you introduce evolve, and now these steps that may have taken 15, 20 minutes now take 2, 3 seconds. Talking specifically about creating shop drawings. So basic Revit shop drawings, you have to create the item, then create the assembly of parts, then drag those parts and onto a sheet, set up your views, drag all that onto a sheet, and then detail it all. It takes roughly about, let's call it 15 minutes to 20 minutes if you know exactly what you're doing and you're pretty good at basic skills. Evolve has automatic spooling. So once you create and define the spool that you want, the assembly, you can put it through the Evolve spooling, and then out will spit out a sheet with um, your views and your schedules and the view templates applied to them. And so you're not doing any dragging, you're not doing any manual work. It's just, I want these 6 pages done. Obviously, the more pages you do, the little longer it takes, but it's way faster than 15, 20 minutes per sheet. When you're modeling these materials in Revit, there's 2 basic elements to model from. Revit uses families. So RFAs or families are built into Revit and built to use in Revit. So it's like if I were to model a chair in Revit, I can take that family chair and place it in 4 different spots around the table. I can also edit that within Revit. So you can do the same thing for mechanical plumbing pipes, duct, fittings, insulation, whatever you want to do, equipment. The next part about that Revit can use is fabrication parts. So what fabrication parts is, they come from a separate software, AutoCAD Fab MEP or CamDuct. If you guys are utilizing this in your shops, you can utilize the parts and pieces from that software inside Revit to build with. Now, the advantages of that is fantastic, because if you know what it produces on the side of the machine, you can then pull it into Revit and build with it and know what it produces outside the machine. So now you're modeling one-to-one. There are advantages and disadvantages to both. The advantages of families and fabrication parts. Families are great because they're built into Revit. You can customize them any way you want. And if you ever have to edit that, you can just go and edit the family right when you're in the project. Fabrication parts are great because it is one-to-one. The disadvantage that fabrication parts has is because it's a separate software, you have to actually go into that software, maintain that database, and bring it back in. It's a little more complicated to use, but understanding how that works is a separate thing that, Evolve works with fabrication parts. Disadvantage of families is also the advantage, right? Because I can edit that in Revit, anyone can go in there and edit that in Revit. Families are great. They follow rules of calculations. So if you're making a bend and it's not a typical bend, Revit or the family might automatically make that bend work. So you can have a 46.25 degree bend if you wanted to in PVC, which doesn't exist. So advantages and disadvantages. As families, you can do whatever you want. Fabrication parts are one-to-one, but they're all hosted in different spots. And so I'm going to kind of go through some of that now with this demo here. This here. So right now I have just move this out of the way. Sorry, you guys can't see that, but I just have the basic Revit sample project in here. And we're going to start with duct. So under systems tab, if I hit duct, I can come now lay duct by start placing items. Clicking first, dragging it over. There's my straight. I'm going to come down 90. It puts a 90 in there automatically. When I select duct, notice I have some modifiers up here under my ribbon. What's the size of my duct? 12 by 12. What's my middle elevation? 4 feet. I'm keeping it at 4 feet so you guys can visually see it on this 2D floor plan. But if I had to put it at 9 feet, I can also do that. If I needed a 8 by 6, 8. Now it's an 8 by 6, same bend. If I had to do an offset, notice Revit is snapping to 45 degrees. You know, this way. But also, if I zoom way in, I can also do a 65 degrees, which, you know, sheet metal is custom, but sometimes you're sticking with standard measurements or you're buying out those fittings. You got to be careful when you're modeling that with families. You can also do placement of fittings manually. So if I have a duct there, I can then come up to duct fittings, and then I can choose what fitting I want using my, we're calling this the family selector. So if I come up here, I can search for elbow, standard rectangular elbow, mitered, and it's putting one in there. I can also standardize what automatic fittings come in here. So these are all different families. These are all different fittings. If I select my duct here and I hit edit type, I get something called routing preferences. So what routing preferences says is that whenever I have an elbow where I make a 90-degree turn, it's going to place this particular elbow there, or this particular T, or this cross standard. If I wanted to change this up and say I wanted to do mitered and hit OK, and then I hit OK again, now whenever I draw with my duct, it gives me a mitered corner. So that's just a regular square. So depending on the family you use, you can determine what your routing preferences are. This is great, especially if you are buying out parts or fabbing your own parts, and how you like to fab your parts. So whether you do bought out miters or rounds or bends, totally up to you. There's also piping, which is very similar to duct. Same thing. I can draw it. I can put an elbow in it. There's my elbow. If I select my pipe again, you notice I have diameter and middle elevation. Let's make this 3/4. Type it. I know we talked about slope earlier. Now, when I select one of these items, notice this has an 1/8 inch slope, and this has an 1/8 inch slope, and this has an 1/8 inch slope. When I select pipe, on the far right side of my ribbon is a modifier. So I can draw with slope. So wherever I started, it's going up an 1/8 over a foot. If I needed to go down an 1/8 over a foot, I could do that as well. So depending on where you're starting on your either highest hub or entry into the building, you can start your slope from there. And no matter what elbows or fittings you put in there, that slope will be there. Now, from a 2D view, that's hard to tell because I'm just clicking on it. It's telling me what my slope is, but I can't see it, so I'm just trusting that it's sloped there. What I can do is if I were to highlight these parts and go to a 3D view, let's turn our link off. And I'm going to turn my visibility to define. I'm going to choose this consistent color so it's easier to see. Selecting a part, holding shift and holding your right mouse allows you to rotate the model and have better control over it. And you can see that my pipe is sloped. I can even align straight to it. And you'll see that the slope is there, sloping up an 1/8 inch. If I wanted to slope it the other way, I can always click it and hit -1/8, and now it's sloped the other way. There's a lot of modifiers you can do to custom fit your pipe. What's great about this is when you combine this with fabrication parts, and I'll talk about that. Same thing with duct, you can do pipe and pipe fittings. You can also do parallel pipes. So how parallel pipes work is if you have multiple runs, if I have a horizontal run of 2 or 3, and that offset is, let's say, 6 inches between, and I have a vertical run of 2, and the offset is 6 inches there as well. When I hover over my pipe, you see some dashed blue lines there. Using my tab key will allow me to select the run, and once I click once with my mouse, you'll see multiple pipes show up. Now that in 3D looks like this with your slope pipe. So all of it's sloped, all of it matches. It's basically an offset from one to the other. This is great for populating if you have multiple, let's say, water lines or gas lines, and you want to put them in there real quick. You can make your one run and then choose your offsets, vertical and horizontal, and complete your run. This is a similar workflow then with conduits. When they're doing conduit runs, you can do similar things with pipes. Now, with pipes, you have fixtures, same thing with duct. But I'm just going to put a simple, is this a sink? Now, it's not correctly on the wall, but what I want to show you are these connectors. So these connectors here tell you what's going to connect into them. This is a family that is built inside Revit. If I zoom in a little bit more, you see I have a 1/2 inch in cold water, 1/2 inch in hot water, and 1.5 inches out drain waste to the vent. And with these connectors, if I take a pipe and connect into it, it will become a single part. So if I do a pipe, and I'll do 1.5 inches, figure this out. See what it looks like in 3D. It drug it out and it put it at the level I was looking at. So you see now I have a pipe there. With that connector there, when I use my tab key, it selects the whole piece. Now, this is funky. Forgive me for putting a sink on a wall, but I wanted to just show you how the connector works. Same thing works for duct and equipment for duct. So if you have large units on the rooftop that you have to come down, you can do reducers and things like that as well. If I change this here to from a 12 to 12 to 3 by 12, it's going to automatically make a reducer for that. So these are the benefits and the pros and cons of families. Is you can do that. It just, is that something that you would actually make in real life? Now with fabrication pipe, what we're going to get into is if you go to your systems tab, you'll see fabrication part. And with fabrication part, you get this menu here on the right. And in this menu, it's blank. You're going to go to your settings. And with Revit or the AEC collection, you automatically get this Imperial content library. I'm going to go ahead and select this, and we're going to load in duct, and we're going to load in some pipe. I'm just going to use ABS, or we'll do PVC. I'm going to move it over to the right and hit OK. And then you'll see this menu over here populate with items to use. I'll let this kind of come in a little bit. I wanted to show you guys how to actually get that into your model. So starting with ductwork, if I choose a straight piece, notice I'm not dragging or drawing anymore. It's coming in a length at a 411. And my properties now is where I determine my size. I don't have any modifiers here. So it's coming in at 411. It's a 24 by 12. If I hit edit part and I want to change the 24 by 12 to something else, I could do that here. I can choose what the connectors are on either side. So if it's standard seam or if it's flanged. Let's see, apply, okay. When I place it and I look at this in 3D, you'll see that this side's flanged and the other side's not. So you can customize however your parts fit together, how you create duct, how they're supposed to fit together. You can also drag this out to make any length that you want, but these parts come out to a fabricatable part. 411 is the size of duct when you have half-inch flange on the other side and what that looks like. You also have square elbows and radius elbows. So just like families, if I choose multi-point routing, I can go ahead and start drawing duct. I can put a 90 in there. I can do, if I want to do a 45, I can. Just do a 45. If I wanted to do a 36 or something outrageous like that, it's doing it because it's buildable, routed, elbow. That's what it is. Piping, I'll show you that way. But notice I can draw the same way I do with families. I can also do multi-point routing. So if I wanted to go from, I can right-click here, say route and fill, and choose to go to that duct there or something like that. Let's give it a better option here. Let's get rid of this, get rid of that. Route and fill to there. It's already filling out with fabrication parts some possibilities. Now there's solution 1 and 2. If I go over, there's solution 2, changing the elbow. So I can cycle through solutions, or I can choose up here what parts and pieces I want to use. And then hit the green check mark, and those parts and pieces are together. Using my tab key, I can check that all those parts are together. Same thing with pipe here. I have very similar. I have schedule 40. I believe this comes in a 20-foot section. Yep. If I wanted to do fourth bend, I could put it on here. Long sweep, fourth bend, eighth bend. If I use my space bar, it's going to rotate every 45 degrees. I could do the route and fill. I could do the multi-point routing. So now I'm creating pipe with elbows. So this one didn't let me do it because that's not a 90-degree bend. So that's what I was showing with the ductwork. Multi-point routing. Let's go 45. Let's go up another 45. Let's say I wanted this to be 80. An 80-degree bend for schedule 40 doesn't exist, so you cannot do that. That's how fabrication parts work. So whatever you can build in real life or what's available in this catalog, which is in a separate software, is what you're able to build with. I prefer fabrication parts because of the buildability, but I combine them with families. So we're going to take slope pipe, for instance. So if I have pipe here and I want to put it at a slope as an eighth of an inch going up, and I'm just going to go ahead and draw some pipe. I'm going to make sure that I'm using correct routing, so 90s, 45s. And let's just use that as an example. Looking at this in 3D, I can see that it's sloped an eighth of an inch. I want this pipe to not be 1.5 inches, but I want it to be 3 inch. Okay. Now there's a button that I can press that will convert this to fabrication parts. So modeling fabrication parts with slope is more of a manual process, whereas I can automatically run it with families. So families is a great way to populate or do design. I can highlight this. If I go to my system, systems tab. Give me a second here. There's a button for fabrication part, design a fabrication. Yep. And when I do that, it's going to take me to another menu. I'm going to decide what service do I want to use. I only have schedule 40 in here, but if I had copper or if I had ABS, I can choose one of those services. And it says, what size do you want to convert to what size? If I'm using copper, I don't have a 3-inch copper size. So if I take a 3-inch drain like this and try to convert it to a 3-inch copper, it's not going to work. So then you have to choose the size you want to convert to. I'm going to use 3-inch, or let's just change it to 2-inch, schedule 40. I hit this green check mark down here at the bottom. And now it's converted all those parts to fabrication parts. By selecting one of those parts, you can tell that by going up to the menu here and seeing MEP fabrication pipe work. I can also see that a lot of my properties are grayed out, and there's not a lot of things I can change in here. You can also come into edit part, and you can change your size and values here. change your connectors, right? If you just have plain PVC connections or copper, or if you go to a flange joint or whatever it is, you can do that. This is all content that comes with Revit and the AutoCAD Fab MVP out of the box. There is many more you can make custom to this. So if you wanted to make talking pipe again, if you want to do certain Charlotte pipe or spears fittings for any reasons, right? You can create that content so that when you order or procure your materials to build or fab with, you have it modeled appropriate to those materials. You can also do the same for families, except that hard rule of if the fitting doesn't exist here, you can't do it. There are settings you can do for pipe. So if I go to my pipe settings here, there's angles here, and you can use any angle or use specific ones and it'll lock them out. So there are ways around to get exactly what you want with RFAs. It takes a little bit more setup, or depending on how you look at it, less setup. It's just fab parts and RFAs are both available to you inside Revit. When it comes to Evolve and using the Evolve tools, there's a lot of Evolve tools up here that are easy to use, like disconnect and reconnect. Happens a lot with models where if I pull this out or slightly breaks, it's disconnected. So now when I use my tab key, it's not selecting the whole part. What these buttons will do is they'll automatically connect them based on a tolerance. So if I'm an inch off or 6 inch off, my tolerance is 6 inches, it will bring it back together. You can do multi-trim. There's a lot of alignment items there as well. You can do the rotate command, which will allow you to rotate from any hub. So for instance, if this had to run this way instead of that way, I can take all this material here and rotate it off this elbow and flop the whole thing apart on the other side. That seems like, why don't you just rebuild it? Rebuilding it makes a lot of work. That tool comes in handy a lot of times when you don't realize that, oh, I did something wrong or I routed the wrong. The prefab manager is the spooling tool I talked about earlier. So the manual process for assemblies would highlight your parts and hit create assembly. With Evolve under the prefab manager, once an assembly is created, you can generate sheets, you can generate plan views, you can tag all these items specifically to your needs. And so now your spool drawings are set to hand out. So is your plan set with all of your spools on it, spool map. And all you had to really work on the best was concerning yourself with how well your model is built. I think Evolve enhanced my workflow a lot because I was able to spend more time on the modeling than concerning myself with, oh, I got to do all these sheets, right? Spending more time on the modeling allows your drawings to be better and easier to read. Whereas if you're spending time on your sheets, you're kind of fixing problems as they come up or spools or sending them out and getting red lines back. I've seen a great improvement with that, not having to worry about the spooling side. To get back into some of the Evolve stuff, I have a little demo video here. And you can see that when I open this up all the way, it goes over automatic hangers, union splicing, and rotating fittings. So what you're going to see here is union splicing and joining. So right now it's automatically making unions based on spaces I have for the whole side, and it's going to run through and create those unions across. This is the rotate fitting command I was talking about earlier. Notice how the rotate is happening on an elbow further down the line, so she can go from one side to the other. Automatic hangers is a great utility to use, especially with ITM content. I'd recommend you use that for any kind of automatic hangers. You can decide the spacing of your hangers, what type of hangers to use for what materials, and where to put your hangers when it comes to T's or the end of the line. You can really dial that in to automatically place those hangers and then pull points from those hangers so you have locations for your embeds. That has also been a great time saver. The basics of Revit that I showed you today, Evolve enhances. The hanger placement tool in Revit doesn't have, so you're manually placing hangers. The hanger placement tool in Evolve automatically places your hangers. So there's a lot of tools, like I said earlier, that enhances your basic workflow that can create efficiencies as you grow as a company. And it's important to understand how Revit works to make Evolve work for you and your workflow. Any questions on that? I know we have a couple polls that we want to do, kind of talking about Revit experience and questions you have about mechanical or plumbing using Revit and how Evolve helps. I don't know, Marina, if you want to post some of those polls here, I think our first one is, yeah, what's your experience level with BIM? How often are you using it? Have you been using it? Is this your first time getting introduced to it?
Yeah, Alex, in all the publications, all you hear is everyone's adopting BIM, but it's interesting. I find in conversations, we still meet so many contractors who are still doing a large part of their projects without Revit. And we'll actually have another poll question on that as well.
Yeah, yeah, BIM is something that's being required by a lot of people. And I want people to know Revit is not BIM. It is a tool for BIM.
Mhm.
BIM is
Mhm.
a process, but understanding your tools is going to help your process immensely. So that's where that lands.
Mhm. Great. Let's take a look at these results. Love to see that a lot of you said you're pros or seasoned. And we still have 5 folks out there saying they're green but trying. And we're glad you're here to join us and learn more.
Yeah, it's always good to understand and kind of review. That's another thing when coming to webinars and stuff, whether you're pro or green, um, it's good to see how other people move through Revit because it may spark a workflow design or change for you as well, and not becoming as stagnant in BIM.
That's a really good point. All right. What percent of your projects are currently being done in Revit?
I know there are some states that are requiring it based on what the project is, so I'm interested to see percentage of projects.
Really, that's
Mhm.
interesting.
Yeah, depending on what you're doing and who it is, requirements maybe come down from the state level.
Hmm.
I think Wisconsin, there's something of buildings or construction in Wisconsin that's requiring Revit or BIM, requiring BIM. We'll say that.
Great. And we had most of the folks on answering the poll with 44% of you saying 75% or more, but a strong 39 saying that under 25% of projects are being done, yeah, let's say with BIM.
I'm curious if that is just because the projects you're getting into, or if it's a choice of not going after the BIM projects.
Mhm.
I know it's intimidating. A lot of people will avoid it because they can't do it, but it's definitely something to start looking to get into.
All right. Next up, we've got what is your biggest BIM struggle?
This is a very good question. Communication is key for any kind of BIM collaboration or coordination, or just any success in BIM. So I'm curious of how many people have struggled with anything, really.
Mhm.
I struggle every day with BIM.
Yep, I
Always,
was
go ahead.
Oh, I was recently at Autodesk's headquarters in Boston, and it was a hoot to hear the Autodesk product people saying, even I, do not know the depths of how to use every tool in Revit. It truly is so, so complex. And that is exactly the reason why, BIMTM does what they do. They're here to provide support, help you with your workflows and content. Um, all right, let's take a look at some of these answers.
Oh, awesome. Accessing useful content. Interesting.
Hmm.
So something Evolve has is actually custom families for you guys to use and ITMs for some content. There are also some good websites out there as well, but the built-in families and content that Evolve has definitely gets you to the point where you're making some good decisions.
Oh, yeah. And we work directly with our customers and clients to make them the content that they need for specific projects, even. So, and some of that is often done in hand with BIMTM. So we
Mhm.
are here to help elevate your projects with custom content.
This is a very true statement. There are definitely some content out there that people need that is not readily available. So
Hmm.
thanks Evolve for that. Project documentation, spooling, okay, annotations. Yeah, these are all a lot of things a lot of people struggle with.
Hmm.
And good spread. Awesome.
Fantastic. And if there are any questions from the audience, now is the time to go into the Q&A tool and submit those. I'm sure Alex would be happy to pull Revit back up and poke around in anything if you guys had a quick question about that.
Of course. Yeah, Revit is it's a massive it's a massive tool. And I will say not everyone, or I don't know if there's a single person that knows everything about Revit.
Mhm.
And if there is, I'd like to meet that person. Um, there are definitely some skill sets for certain items in Revit that professionals had to be good at. MEP wise, there's, obviously pipe and mechanical, electrical. Um, but there's also precast and there's also managing the project and, you know, evolve. Evolve is an add-in that and enhances workflows, and those are more tools to use. So I would say as you're going through your BIM journey, working in Revit is don't be afraid to press buttons. Don't be afraid to kind of mess up and go down the rabbit hole of all these menus. Eventually, those become second nature, and you're going to be proficient at the items you use in your workflow. So definitely explore a lot.
That's great. And we have a question here. Carl asks, could we see a demonstration of the Evolve sheet creator? Um, Alex, do we have time for that?
Let me see if my license for mechanical is good to go right now. I know there was some stuff this morning where I had to share it for another person, but let me find out.
Hmm. And if for
I
some
can,
reason we can't
yeah,
do it today, we can absolutely reach out to you after the webinar, Carl.
definitely. So coming through here, if I select this, I go to my Evolve Mechanical, and I can use our Define Spools tool. So that if I define, yeah, let's see if my login will work here. So once you hit Define Spools, that's what creates the assembly. When you hit Prefab Manager, and actually I think you can do it in electrical here. Now it won't work because I think this is pipe, but if I go to my Prefab Manager, nope, I cannot pull it up right now. No, I'm sorry. But under your prefab manager, there are buttons at the top where you select your assemblies. Then you can hit spool assemblies or renumber assemblies. Typically, as a workflow, I have to always hit renumber before I hit spool. Once they're spooled, you'll see the sheets generate. When you create your spools, they require you to set up uh, a title block that has your custom templates, the templates that you use every day to apply to that title block. So when you spool, those templates are applied to your view. It's a very slick and very easy to customize. Um, I was able to customize and set up a couple spools already in about an hour, which is pretty fast setup, especially if you have a lot of those templates and everything ready to go. So,
Great. We have another question here. Does
sure.
Evolve Electrical include busway families?
Let's find out. Oh, so I don't know if Evolve Electrical comes with busway families because I can't check it right now. But if you have Evolve, here is your family browser. It is very similar to when you go to insert Autodesk families like this. So you can search for those items. I believe they do come with busways. Um, but I can't currently show you that because of my licensing at the moment. But yes,
And Alex, I just shot over a link to you. I think if we pull that up, we'll be able to take a quick look at some of the busway families.
perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, if you just scroll down there.
Yep. So we do have busway families. Um, I don't know if these have images on them. But busway families exist. There's also fittings, cable trays, changeovers, conduits, bends, bodies, fittings, uh, equipment. So Evolve comes with an extensive family for you to use. And what's great about Evolve families is all these things where I say EE, this is Evolve electrical. There's also EM for Evolve mechanical. All of these family content comes with custom parameters. And with those parameters in Revit, you'll notice I have EM parameters and EV parameters here. That content, once you put it in your model, can be shown in your parameters and see your values and your properties that can then be spooled and scheduled. So along with the Evolve families, they come with custom content that the shared parameters can read off of. So when I'm looking at Evolve mechanical, I can say if it's a fitting type, if it's double walled material, service type, what's the fitting, does it have a double wall, is it checked, right? So there's a lot of items here that Evolve can look at and say, yes, it's this, 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 this. Because I don't have the shared parameters, or I'm not using Evolve items, they're blank. But when you're using Evolve items, a lot of the stuff can fill out depending on what you're doing. And then put it on a schedule, which is great to see.
That's great, Alex. Thanks for walking us through that. And I
Yeah,
do know too that the Evolve families are customizable. So, if it's close to what you need with a few small adjustments, you've got your custom content ready to go.
right. Just like I mentioned earlier, a lot of the families can be customized to whatever your needs are. Um, for instance, this is just a grill of some kind. But if I edit family, this is family editor inside Revit, but in here you can customize the way your family looks and how it fits in the fields based on the views and stuff that you have and parameters built in. I'm not going to get into editing family because that's a whole nother side of Revit that you can professional you can learn about. But yes, because it's RFAs and families, you can edit them right inside Revit inside of your project. So that's a big plus for RFAs.
Excellent. All right. Last chance to submit your questions here, and then we can wrap it up. Oscar asks, is a Revit training available for a complete training on site?
I guess that depends on training wise. So,
Mhm.
we do trainings through teams and stuff like that if that's something you want. If it's on site, you can also contact us BIMTM, and we can try and work something out for you there.
Absolutely. Oh, this is a great question. I love this one. What do you personally prefer, families or ITMs? That is something we have been talking about over here a lot.
It's anonymous too. Okay, my preference is ITMs. I prefer ITMs because they're built. That being said, like I showed earlier, I've used a combination of families and ITMs for slope of pipe specifically. If I'm using duct, I would probably use ITMs just for the fact that with ITM ducting, if this is my straight piece and I have a run that's, let's say, this long, and I wanted to chop it up so I can use those pieces, I can select this duct here, optimize lengths, and now it's cut into sections at 4'11" for me already. And I have my little cutoff at the end.
Mhm.
I'm a big proponent of prefab and fabrication. My background was modular construction. So a lot of times I like to see every part and piece as it is, whether it's rotated 22 degrees, 11 and a quarter, whatever it is, right? I'd like to see that. And I think ITMs does that better for me than families.
Mhm. And one thing I hear a lot from BIM managers and detailers is that sometimes the ITM files are very heavy, very hard to run. But the great thing is Evolve has been optimized so that a lot of that load has been removed. So if you're running ITMs on some other programs, you may be running into that issue. But with Evolve, it's a lot easier to leverage both.
Yes. Yeah, that's what's great about Evolve, whether you use families or ITMs. it works for either decision. But personal preference, ITMs. I wonder who said that. I want to ask you guys, what's your personal preference? I've had that debate a lot with many people. I see the side for both. A lot of people say design in families and then fabricate in ITMs.
Mm.
I say don't do the work twice over, but just a personal feeling of mine.
Definitely have to agree with you on that, Alex.
Yes. Don't model twice if you don't have to.
Okay, Dan asks, fabrication because of having to send it to a burner table and coil line. Oh, I see what
Nice.
you're saying.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Jeremy as well.
Yep, I love
Awesome.
the audience chiming in here. We've got a
Mhm.
hand raiser saying, I prefer ITMs too. Great. Here's another question. Family data can still be extracted to fabrication machines via text files, though, correct?
Okay, so that depends. There are other, I don't know, can we export CSVs? I think we can. So you can take a CSV or a schedule from Evolve and export that. So if you're using CSV or comma displays text or whatever you want to comma, yeah, you can put that into the controller. The machine, the the thing about having ITMs rather than families do that is ITMs are built for that machine. Those AutoCAD fabrication MEP and CamDuct run on those machines. Um, and directly export to those. So doing a CSV, yes, you can do that. I've done that with lists of stud framing, for instance, for cuts instead of, because I can't use the ITM wise, I put families and I make cuts and send that to it, and Pusher will cut that. Yes, that is possible.
All right, great.
Any other questions? This is good feedback.
Yeah, this is awesome. We love hearing from you guys.
Mm-hmm. All right.
All right, with that, looks like there's no more questions, so we will wrap this up. Thank you, everyone, for attending the webinar today. We loved hearing from you and the questions and the polls. And above all, I hope that you found the information valuable. Please make sure to follow Evolve and BIMTM on social media to keep up with all of our other webinars. There are so many pieces of valuable information that BIMTM puts out. Evolve MEP's YouTube channel has tons of demos, video walkthroughs of how to use these different tools within Revit. So please make sure to follow us. As a reminder, this webinar has been recorded and we'll send out the recording in an email to all registrants. And for those of you who questions we couldn't answer today, we'll be reaching out. Thanks so much for joining us and have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.